Hi, my name is Elaine Sanchez.
I'm Alex Sanchez. Elaine and I are co-founders of CaregiverHelp.com, and we want to personally welcome you to our online caregiver support program. Elaine and I have both been caregivers. I cared for my first wife through her terminal illness with lung cancer.
And I was a long-distance caregiver for my parents for 10 years. We know how difficult it is to balance work and family with meeting the needs of aging, chronically ill, and disabled loved ones.
When we were going through it, we often felt like we were alone.
We understand caregiver stress, and we know if you're like most caregivers, you may have a tendency to ignore your own physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual needs in order to meet the needs of your care receiver.
We do understand what it's like. That's why we developed Caregiver Help. We wanted to offer support that didn't create more work or frustration for the caregiver.
CaregiverHelp.com features topic-specific modules. Each one contains numerous short videos and journal worksheets. That way, if you feel like you're about to blow your top, you can go to the anger module. If you're struggling with guilt because of something that you did or didn't do, or because you're experiencing feelings that are making you uncomfortable, you can click on one of the guilt videos.
Even if you only have 10 minutes, you can watch a video and get some helpful insights along with an emotional boost and maybe even a few laughs.
This program evolved out of the writings of two wonderfully unique and expressive women. The first one is Madelyn Cuban, my mother. She was a 70-year-old Kansas farm wife who was in the process of recovering from open heart surgery. She was also coping with osteoporosis and dimming vision due to her macular degeneration. She didn't sleep at night because of restless leg syndrome, and she had severe hearing loss that had been brought on as a result of the medication she was taking for her heart. And then my dad, who was as healthy, robust, and vigorous as any 75-year-old man on the planet, suffered a stroke, and she became his caregiver. Throughout the 6.5 years she cared for him, she experienced incredible physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual trials. And she had to develop some unique coping strategies. One thing she did to relieve her emotional stress was to write letters to me.
The second woman is Dorothy Tucker. Dorothy kept a journal throughout her 30-year career as a nurse in nursing homes and on Alzheimer's units.
Madelyn and Dorothy were as different as night and day, but as caregivers, they had a lot in common. They both experienced a tremendous amount of emotional stress.
And they both had an amazing ability to find the humor in difficult, trying, and even absurd situations.
I bet they did. When my mother felt isolated, alone, angry, afraid, guilty, or depressed, she went to her computer and wrote letters to me. It's our hope that when you are experiencing any of these difficult emotions, that you'll go to your computer and click on to CaregiverHelp.com.
This program works like a caregiver. It's available 24/7, and it will be there whenever you need it. Turn to us for hope, for comfort, for support, and a little humor to get you through a long day or a sleepless night.
Try us out, and if you think Caregiver Help will help you, let's get started.
We're going to start this session with a caregiver self-assessment test. Print the test, and then as you go through it, check every statement that applies to you.
Do this quickly. Don't overthink the questions, and don't judge your responses. When you're done, go on to the next video. If you checked 4 or more statements, it's likely that you're suffering from caregiver burnout. This is a common occurrence among caregivers.
It is a state of physical, emotional, and mental exhaustion. It often results from directing all of your attention and energy towards the care of others while ignoring your own physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual needs.
And here's the problem with that. Studies have shown that the extreme emotional stress of taking care of an aging, chronically ill, or disabled loved one can shorten the life of the caregiver by as much as 10 years. It's not unusual for the caregiver to die before the care receiver.
I think this would be a good time to introduce you to a very special caregiver, Elaine's mother, Madelyn. Watch the video, Meet Madelyn, and you will see how Madelyn managed her own emotional stress through developing an attitude which she eventually called creative indifference.
So when you're ready, let's watch Meet Madelyn. I think you're going to love her. It was October 30th, 1993, and I picked up the ringing phone. It was my mother, and she said, "Your father's had a stroke." Knowing this was his greatest fear, I immediately asked, "How bad is it?" And she said, "Oh, honey, it's really bad." She said the right side of his face is all lopsided and droopy. He's completely lost the use of his right hand. He's having a terrible time walking, and when he talks, I can't understand a word he says. And I said, "Oh, Mom, what can I do?" And she said, "Could you please come home?" Well, as I mentally ticked off the dozen or so reasons why that would be absolutely impossible, I heard myself saying, "Of course, I'll pack tonight and I'll get on the road the first thing in the morning." So the next day, as I drove the 450 miles from Colorado Springs to McPherson, Kansas, I had a lot of time to think. But even so, I could not make this work out in my mind. My dad was only 75 years old. And men in our family just did not get sick or die at that age. He was as healthy and robust as any 75-year-old man on the planet. Now, had he been the one that called me and said something had happened to my mother, I would have been devastated, but I wouldn't have been surprised. Although she was only 70, she just had this little cottony puff of white hair that barely concealed her scalp. She was losing her vision because of macular degeneration. Her back was hunched with osteoporosis. She had a scar that started at her throat and went to her breastbone from open heart surgery from which she had not recovered. She didn't sleep at night because of her restless leg syndrome. But the thing that was frustrating her and making her crazy beyond all belief was the severe hearing loss that had been brought on by the medication that she was taking for her heart. And now she had two choices. She could either sell homesteaded farm ground, put my brother out of business because he farmed with them to pay for my dad's care, or she could take him home and take care of him herself. Now, how many of you know farmers in here? Have you ever known a farmer? Okay, so you know what the choice was, right? My dad loved my mother more than anything, except for the land. So there was absolutely no question in her mind. She was going to take him home. So that's what she did. And over the course of the next 6.5 years, she had to develop some unique coping strategies to help her adjust and manage the stress of this situation. So one of the things that she did on a regular basis is she would go to her computer and she would sit down and write letters to me in which she expressed everything she was experiencing and exactly how she felt about it. So I did save those letters, and as Jinx mentioned, when I was asked to speak at our church on Mother's Day about mother-daughter relationships, there was this one letter that I wanted to share. And as I went through that box, reading other letters, looking for that one letter, I realized I had a treasure trove of wit and wisdom. So this is the one that started it all. And I can imagine that she would have been standing in her kitchen, and she would have been wearing an apron, because she always wore an apron, because if you wear an apron, you don't get your clothes dirty, you don't have to wash them as often, and they don't wear out. And she would have been standing there, and I imagine that she was rinsing the dishes and then slamming them into the rack. And at some point, she came to the decision that she had two choices. She could either go to the computer and write, or she could stand there and explode. So this is what she had to say. Dear Elaine, I am so upset over the advice that is being given to people today about doing your own thing and to hell with everybody else. I think that's one of the reasons there are so many divorces and so much unhappiness in the world today. And I think Dr. Wayne Dyer had a lot to do with this when he wrote this book, Your Erroneous Zones. I bought this book and I started reading it, And I got so angry and up on my high horse, I just had to put it down. I couldn't even finish it. Two things upset me about that book. And the first thing is, I don't think Dyer is aware of the fact that there are two genders. Seems to me he thinks there's only the male. And for another thing, he just keeps pounding away at this idea that a person should do what he or she wants to do. Listen, old lady, I'm here to tell anyone who will listen that life is not made up of doing what you want to do. Fortunately, I have learned how to find my own peace and happiness from within. Because to tell you the truth, I can't think of anything that's all that exciting or invigorating about getting up in the morning and fixing breakfast and then doing the dishes and then starting a load of laundry and then running the sweeper and helping your father and then fixing lunch and doing the dishes and doing more laundry and more housework and helping your father. For me, an exciting day might consist of having an interesting telephone conversation or possibly running into somebody I know in the grocery store or on the street. And for this I should take vitamins? I should eat right and exercise so I can prolong this wonderful life experience? Give me a break. No, my joy in life comes from learning and growing mentally and spiritually. And the thing that I've discovered about having my own peace and happiness from within is that I can stay mentally detached and still do what has to be done to give other people a reasonable amount of happiness. So this detached attitude later evolved into what she called an attitude of creative indifference. And I asked her one time, so what's the difference between being detached and having an attitude of creative indifference? And she said, oh, it's the same thing. She says, you can call it whatever you want to call it. She says, I just think that creative indifference sounds a little nicer. I think detached sounds a little cold. She said, you call it whatever you want to call it, but what it means is not allowing yourself to become emotionally ravaged by the disease or the progression of events. If you're caring for someone who can no longer care for him or herself, you might identify with Madelyn. There's a lot of drudgery associated with caregiving. Your days, like hers, might be physically exhausting, frustrating, and mind-numbingly boring, and many of your nights might be sleepless.
Madelyn worked hard at maintaining her attitude of creative indifference. Some days were tougher than others.
She didn't really have a process other than to repeat her favorite mantra, which was, as long as I have the ability to think and reason, I have the power to choose my attitude toward any person, thing, or event.
Madelyn's attitude was the inspiration for our three-step process of developing an attitude of creative indifference. And we feel confident that if you follow this process, it will help you understand and cope with some of your most stressful situations.
The first step is to become aware of the specific issues that upset you. There are lots of ways to identify and name a problem, but the most efficient and effective way we know is to write it down.
Something changes when you get swirling thoughts out of your head and put them down on paper. You create a little distance, which allows you to stand back and look at things from a different perspective.
You gain a broader and more objective view of the entire situation.
We're going to ask you to be honest and specific about the people, situations, and events that are upsetting you. And then we want you to write them down.
The second step is acceptance, and this is hard because we tend to think there should be a solution to every problem and a cure for every illness. Unfortunately, life doesn't work out that way, and this is where acceptance comes in.
Once you identify a specific issue that is upsetting you, the next step is to accept that there are a lot of complicating factors that generate a wide range of emotions.
And those emotions can be extremely difficult to manage.
So here's what we want you to understand about acceptance. Your feelings are real, and you're entitled to feel every one of them.
Even the feelings that surprise, shock, upset, and disappoint you.
And here's the most important thing to remember. Having negative feelings doesn't make you a bad person.
You are in a situation that you would not have chosen. There are countless complicating and contributing factors that are beyond your control. Your care receiver's life has changed. Your life has changed. Your relationship has and will continue to change as the disease or the disability progresses.
You may be a long way from the end of this journey, and it's possible that what's ahead for your care receiver is as frightening as the thought of what your life will be like when it's over.
So it's really important to accept the fact that you are human, that you will make mistakes, that you will not always feel and act the way that you wish you could. And it's critically important to accept that there are many, many factors over which you have absolutely no control. So if you can get to a point of acceptance mentally and emotionally, it may make the third step, which is action, a little less stressful.
Sometimes you get lucky. You identify a problem, determine that something can actually be done to improve the situation, and you take action.
Throughout the course, we suggest a lot of action steps. We hope you'll try everything that makes sense to you. However, there will be times when you come up against situations for which there are no solutions.
When that's the case, we're going to ask you to make a choice between two different courses of action.
The first choice is to let it go. If you can't control, change, or fix it, we want you to try to release it. The second choice, which we don't think is a good one, is to continue to focus on the problem, worry about it, and obsess over it. And we hope you'll come to understand that this course of action won't fix anything, and it will only add to your emotional stress.
You may want to print more than one copy of the 3 steps to developing an attitude of creative indifference.
Post it on your refrigerator, tape it to your bathroom mirror, frame it and put it on your desk. In other words, put it where you will see it often to help you remember. And then, when you're ready, go to the Caregiver Anger module.
Print the PDF, watch the videos, and then we'll walk you through the 3-step process of awareness, acceptance, and action regarding the people, situations, and events that are making you mad.
So when you're ready, let's get started. Here's what we want you to take away from this segment. First, anger is a normal and predictable response to situations, events, and people over which you have little or no control. And as a caregiver, the situations, events, and people over which you have little or no control is practically limitless. So then, if you are a living, breathing human being, understand you are going to get angry. And finally, we want you to remember that getting mad does not make you a bad person.
The goal is not for you to stop getting angry. The goal is to first help you understand and accept that anger is a part of the caregiver experience. And second, to help you manage your anger so you don't end up in the repetitive cycle of anger guilt, which can lead to depression and countless other undesirable emotional and physical outcomes.
So here are the steps. Watch the video, then complete the accompanying journal worksheets. After that, determine the action steps you're willing to take.
Now this is the crucial step. Write them down. Commit to doing them. Finally, start incorporating those action steps into your daily routine. When you're ready, let's get started with Caregiver Anger number 1. Why am I angry? Let me count the ways.
Why am I angry? Oh, let me count the ways. Let's do a quick overview of caregiver anger. See if any of this sounds familiar to you. I think it helps to remember that anger is actually a normal and predictable response to circumstances over which we have little or no control. And if you're a caregiver, you know that there are a lot of circumstances over which you have little or no control. So let's talk about who gets angry. Professional caregivers, family caregivers, and care receivers. So in other words, everybody gets angry. According to Aristotle, anybody can become angry. That is easy. But to be angry with the right person and to the right degree and at the right time and for the right purpose and in the right way, that is not within everybody's power and is not easy. Well, guess what? No kidding. Unfortunately, we can't make Alzheimer's and other dementia-related diseases go away by getting angry. So we have to find ways to cope with this emotion. Let's start with acknowledging the fact that you're human. And as a caregiver, you are going to struggle. Sometimes your better angels will prevail, and sometimes you're going to react badly to difficult or trying circumstances. Let's talk first about professional caregivers and what makes them angry. They start every shift with a heavy workload, knowing that more tasks are going to be added on as the day progresses. And then there are the endless stacks of policies and paperwork that have to be dealt with. There are generally way more tasks that need to be done on any given shift than there are hours to complete them, which gets more complicated when care receivers aren't in the mood to cooperate. They may refuse to take their medications, or they may be more inclined to throw a punch rather than take a shower. And all the while, the clock is ticking. And then they may get a call or a visit from unhappy family members. And did I mention coworkers who have to call in sick, show up late, or don't seem to be available when help is most needed? And they get angry with themselves for getting angry because they're professionals and they want to always do the right thing at the right time, and getting angry feels like a failure. Now, what makes family caregivers angry? Well, they get mad at the disease. And then the list of things that their care receivers do to upset, irritate, and aggravate them could easily stack up from here to the moon. They get mad about how much red tape there is when it comes to getting the right kind of medical care and figuring out Medicare and Medicaid reimbursements. They get upset with the Veterans Administration when they're trying to figure out benefits. They get angry at insurance companies that seem reluctant to turn loose of reimbursements. They get mad at professional caregivers and at family members who seem to disappear whenever their help is needed the most. They resent their loss of freedom, not to mention the money it takes. And like professional caregivers, they get angry with themselves for being less than perfect. They want to be saintly, and when they blow up, they feel like they have failed. So as a caregiver, you need to understand that getting angry from time to time is inevitable. The question is, how are you going to handle it? I'd like to suggest that you start with cutting yourself a little slack. After all, even angels get hacked off once in a while. You may be a professional caregiver or you may be a family caregiver. Whatever the capacity, you're human. Some of the triggers, the things that upset both types of caregivers, may be different, but caregivers have many things in common. Starting with the fact that they both have an amazing capacity for compassion and a desire to provide comfort. Caring for people who have Alzheimer's and other forms of dementia, and for individuals who are suffering from progressive and degenerative diseases, is one of the most difficult and generous acts of love any of us will ever perform on behalf of another. And you can only do this job if you have a huge heart. On the flip side, both types of caregivers face endless tasks, duties, and responsibilities that have to be attended to on a daily basis. The expectations they set for themselves and the expectations others set for them are often unrealistically large. And very few caregivers live in a vacuum. They have numerous people in their lives and a variety of projects that are always demanding attention. So they often feel like there just isn't enough time in their day and they're always running behind. They need to provide care for their care receivers. They have families that want and need their attention. There's shopping to be done. Someone has to cook dinner. The house has to be cleaned. And the laundry certainly is not going to do itself. And then, when they're trying to juggle all of these various responsibilities, instead of getting praise and being told how wonderful they are, they often get criticized for not doing enough or for not doing it according to somebody else's standards. So, guess what? Pressure builds and they blow up. And who could blame them? I mean, really, who wouldn't get a little steamed? So if it's safe to acknowledge that caregiver anger is inevitable, let's look at how we can apply the 3 steps of creative indifference toward this feeling. Step 1 is to list the people and situations with which you are upset. Step 2 is to accept your feelings. List the contributing conditions and circumstances. Who else or what else is making your job as a caregiver more complicated? And step 3 is to take action. In the next segment, we're going to cover action steps to manage caregiver anger. But before we go, take a few minutes to complete steps 1 and 2. Step 1, write it down. Who or what is making you angry? Step 2, what additional factors beyond the obvious problem are contributing to or complicating the situation? Once you become aware of the issues and acknowledge the difficulty of the situation, coming up with a plan of action may be a little bit easier. See you soon.